to IARPEC for hosting this event. So we'll start with a very quick self-introduction. We have quite a number of NSF folks here. So we'll start with that. I'll call on everyone just to make it a little bit more efficient in the Zoom constantly moving around tiles. Hopefully I won't miss anyone from NSF. We'll then follow with a quick, we have just a few slides, give a few overview information of the latest NNA solicitation, and then, as Liz mentioned, we'll have plenty of time for questions. So I'll start myself. My name is Ariane Dolinskaya, and I am a program director and engineering directorate at NSF, but I'm here as part of the working group member from NNA. Eve?
Hi, my name is Eve Boyle, and I am a Science and Technology Policy Fellow at NSF in the Social Sciences Directorate.
Thank you. Maddie?
Hi, everyone. My name is Madeline Midyatman, and I'm a program analyst in the Office of the Assistant Director for the Directorate of Geosciences.
Thank you. Kate?
Hi, Kate Rock. I'm actually a contractor to the National Science Foundation through a small company called QED Enterprises, Inc., but I work very closely with the Arctic Logistics Program and I'm here to answer any questions about that.
Thank you. Jonathan?
Hi, I'm Jonathan Wynn. I'm a program director in the Division of Earth Sciences of the Directorate for Geosciences.
Excellent. Brad?
Hello, I'm Brad Barker. I am the lone program director from the education arena. I'm from DRL.
Thank you. Siobhan?
Hi, I'm Siobhan Madison. I'm an anthropologist, and I represent the SBE Directorate, Social Behavioral and Economic Sciences, and I'm a rotator from New Mexico.
Great. Mamadou? Remember that mute button.
Okay, I'm Mamadou Diallo. I'm a program director in the Directorate of Engineering, and I'm a member of the NNA working group.
Thanks. Greg?
Hi, everybody. I'm Greg Anderson. I'm a program officer in the Arctic Sciences section at NSF and working on NNA. And I'm coming to you from Northern Virginia on the traditional homelands of the Piscataway and Manahoac peoples.
Thanks, Greg. Wenda?
Good afternoon. I'm Wenda Bauschbies, an NSF program officer in the Social Behavioral and Economics Directorate, working on science and technology studies and ethics and responsible research, as well as NNA.
Great. Colleen?
Hi, everyone. I'm Colleen Strawhacker. I'm a program officer in the Office of Polar Program in the Arctic Sciences section.
Excellent. Jesus?
Hello, everybody. My name is Jesus Albelo Marosa, one of the engineer science analysts for the Division of Civil Mechanical Manufacturing Innovation, hosting from Puerto Rico.
Excellent. I don't think I missed anyone, but from NSF, hopefully not. All right, with that said, Maddie, if you can start sharing the screen and we'll cover just a few slides, as I mentioned, going over the some information from the latest solicitation. Thank you. Looks great. Thanks, Maddie. So this solicitation, NSF 22-520, that was published about a month ago, is kind of the latest solicitation is an ongoing effort and commitment of NSF to support research and dissemination of new knowledge needed to inform the economy, security, and resilience of the nation, including the kind of the larger Arctic region, as well as the global impacts and how it with respect to the Arctic change. So this is the fourth solicitation, and we'll be really highlighting the significant changes from the previous, as well as give a kind of more general overview. So if we go to the next slide, as you might be thinking about submitting or coming to NNA program with your research ideas or other types of proposals, it's important to keep in mind these four major goals for NNA. And as you structure your proposal, it is really important to talk about how you address these goals. So our first goal for NNA is to enable understanding of local and global effects of Arctic change based on the interconnections among the natural environment, the built environment, and social system. And we'll talk more about these three kind of an interconnection with these three different systems in just a minute. Our second goal is to foster a diverse, integrative, and well-positioned Arctic research community. And here, the diversity really means in a variety of metrics that we are really trying to look at. It includes researchers coming from different disciplines and backgrounds, coming with different methodologies, bringing to the problems at hand, different types of institutions, new institutions to research, new researchers institutions to the Arctic research. So definitely welcoming, folks who might not have done any work in the Arctic or related to Arctic, but bring in a very important, relevant new perspective for some of the problems that we are facing within the changing Arctic and its impact. Our third goal is to inform U.S. national security and economic development and kind of the needs, as well as enable resilient, sustainable Arctic communities as a result of this change. And finally, enhance the effort in formal and informal education and how it kind of is focused on the social built and natural environments, the interaction between them, and the impacts of the Arctic change at a variety of scale, from going from local to all the way to the global impact. So if we go to the next slide, here's kind of our Venn diagram that you've probably seen in the previous solicitation. It really remains at the kind of the heart of NNA. So in the heart of NNA is our belief that in order for us as a society to really accurately and effectively be able to look at the changes that are happening in the Arctic and the impact that they're having locally and globally, we cannot really look at the isolation in a very specific, very narrowly focused system. In reality, everything is interconnected. And so what NNA does is requires proposers really look at their problems or questions at the interconnection between the social systems, the natural environment, and the built environment. And what is even more important is to make sure that when you come in with the proposals that has to explicitly talk about what questions, where on the interconnections, the overlap that these questions are positioned, is to make sure that the expertise on the team that is coming with the proposal also matches those components. So if you are looking at problems that may be or specific question and the interconnection between social systems and built environment, it's important to clearly demonstrate in the proposal how your team has expertise in the methodologies rooted in those kind of relevant systems. And then around what you can see the 6 focus areas, and on the next slide we can actually see them listed more clearly. We're not going to go through right now one by one. We really encourage you to read solicitation where we talk about each of those focus areas. Also, the accompanying frequently asked question document has more details on each of those focus areas, as well as some examples of what kind of we envision for each of these. What important thing I want to highlight now is every proposal needs to address at least one of them. So when you're looking at the questions and the intersection between the natural, the social, and the built environment systems, you really need to also clearly communicate and identify what are the focus areas that you are tackling. And this is a very good example where more is not necessarily better. In fact, I would say it's definitely not better. So don't try to address as many of them as you can, because often that kind of makes it hard for the proposers to actually very clearly and convincingly argue that you really are doing all of those well. So what we would encourage you, it's very natural to have some of them being kind of connected and coupled. So it's natural to do maybe more than 1, 2, or 3 of them together. But definitely make sure, as before, that you have the right, well-focused and clearly articulated expertise and defined problems as they relate to the focus areas that you choose to address in your proposal. And if we go to the next slide, I'm going to hand it off to Brad.
Yes, thank you, Irina. So for FY22, some of the major revisions we have. So the solicitation adds a new track seeking proposals for the incubator grants. And with that, we've discontinued the planning grant track. Additionally, we've included guidance on the role of the NNA community office, clarified language describing the NNA collaboratory grant track. And now this is a recurring solicitation with a due date set for February of each year. And we've also updated the language describing special considerations for collaborations with Arctic communities. And on the next slide, you can see there are 3 types of proposals. Again, the NNA incubator grant, which is up to $300,000 for 2 years. The research grants, which are up to $3 million for 5 years. And then the collaboratory grants that have no budget restrictions and a maximum duration of 5 years. Also, the deadline for this year, FY22, will be February 16th. Next year, 2023, February 8th. And then it's the second Wednesday in February annually thereafter. And you should also know that your budget does not have to be the maximum amount. So if you're doing an incubator grant, it does not have to be $300,000 for 2 years. NSF expects a range of budgets and durations for these grants. And on the next slide, we'll talk about the incubator grants. So the incubator grants support activities related to convergence research, team formation, pilot convergence research, testing project feasibility, and/or engagement and capacity building to address important challenges. And again, these must address at least one NNA focus area. And unlike the previous planning track, the incubator grants can be used to support convergent research activities. On the next slide, we'll talk about research grants. So the solicitation calls for creative proposals for fundamental research that tackles convergent scientific and engineering challenges related to the rapidly changing Arctic. And there are 4 criteria for these research grants. So the first one, again, it must address at least one of the NNA focus areas, address questions on the interactions or connections between 2 or more of the major elements from the Venn diagram that you saw earlier. It has to have a strong connection to real world needs of the changing Arctic or its global impact with clear evidence for appropriate expertise within the investigative team. And then finally, clearly articulate how methods and theories from the social, natural, environmental, computing, and informal sciences and engineering contribute to the intellectual merit and broader impacts of the proposed research. And on the next slide, we'll talk about the collaboratory grants. So organize and collaborate on multifaceted, complex challenges and opportunities related to the rapidly changing Arctic. These grants also should support activities that involve a breadth of collaborations, working together to address grand challenge questions of a scope broader than what you see or what we would expect for a research grant, with outcomes that have far-reaching implications. These projects must address the interactions or connections among all 3 of the major elements depicted in the Venn diagram, and then also at least one of the NNA focus areas. And finally, so these grants do not support the construction or rehabilitation of physical infrastructure. And with that, on the next slide, I will turn it over to Colleen.
Yep, thanks, Brad. So recently earlier this year, we established the new NNA community office. And this is a really excellent resource for both already funded PIs and PIs planning to submit a proposal to the Navigating the New Arctic program. The NNA community office is composed of a team from the University of Colorado, the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and Alaska Pacific University. And they've really started creating a number of resources that's really helpful to the NNA community. So you can see their website here. Eve also put it in the chat. I would really recommend you checking out their website and reaching out if you find any of their resources helpful. Because the NNA community office is a resource for the entire NNA community, we do not allow letters of collaboration from NNA CO personnel in their capacity as a representative from the community office, just to ensure that it is fair for everyone submitting to NNA. Next slide, please. So given the foci of navigating the new Arctic, given that it's really solution oriented, we're thinking about kind of real world challenges and opportunities in the Arctic. It's not surprising that a number of you are going to want to work directly with people living in the Arctic. And this has proved to be tricky for much of the scientific community. We've received a lot of feedback from people living in the Arctic, including Indigenous communities, on how both NSF and NNA, the NNA community, can do better in this space. So earlier this year, we've issued 2 documents. One was a Dear Colleague letter on NSF's efforts to improve the inclusion of local and Indigenous voices in Arctic research, as well as a website, nsf.gov/ACE, which stands for Arctic Community Engagement, which again provides you with a number of different resources. We have things like different other programs who want to fund in this space, what NSF is trying to do to be more inclusive in this space, how we're working with the community of PIs and with Arctic Indigenous residents to really do better. So I would encourage you all to take a look at those documents. They're really helpful to get an idea of what we're looking for in this space and how we're really starting to think about this within NSF. Next slide, please. So building upon that, we know that if you are planning on working with people living in the Arctic, including Indigenous communities, we understand that these collaborations are going to take a number of different forms. You might want to full-on co-produce with Indigenous collaborators, and Indigenous scientists may want to full-on co-produce with you. That's great. It is not required of NNA proposals for you to do so, but it's certainly a welcomed method to the NNA competition. I would say if you're doing co-production, remember that has to start, the partnership starts at the outset of you thinking about the project, of you co-creating research questions together, of you writing the proposal together and having a shared budget. Sometimes, full-on co-production is not necessary, or it's not what the partners want. There might be an outreach component to it. There might be some other different aspects. You might want to hire, polar bear guides from communities for your project, or you might just be working near or in villages. So all of these things are something that you need to be aware of as you're creating your NNA project. So the solicitation goes through and kind of outlines some of these options. Again, we don't want to prescribe what these collaborations look like. That's up to your project team and your partners, but know that we are evaluating these things. I would outline these partnerships very clearly in your proposal and make sure the budget is there to support those partnerships. We also expect that your proposal will be in accordance with the IARPC principles for conducting research in the Arctic, which were recently revised a couple of years ago. Next slide, please. So with that, we, in addition to all of the other supplementary documents that you'll be submitting with your proposal, like the data management plan, if you're planning on funding a postdoc, you'll need the postdoc mentoring plan. The NNA competition also requires a management and integration plan. And this supplementary document is really where you can get into the nitty-gritty of how your team fits together, how you plan your project developing over time. We know these convergence research projects are, they're big. There are a lot of moving pieces, a lot of diverse partners being involved. So this gives you the opportunity to convince the reviewers and program officers that you have a plan in place that you can complete the project as proposed. So you'll want to start that with your convergence statement, which talks about which of the Venn diagrams you're meeting, which parts of the NNA Venn diagram you're meeting, which focus areas you're meeting. You will list all the partners involved in the project, how you'll all be working together. You'll describe those partnerships in detail. You'll want a timeline of how these things will be created, completed. And then we want you to think a little bit about the ethical and environmental considerations of your project. And anything, we're hoping this pandemic ends soon, but we know that there's a lot of uncertainty still around COVID-19. So if you want to kind of put anything in that document, you'll put it there too. Again, this is all outlined in the solicitation, but this document is critical. It is necessary for your proposal submission to come in to really kind of show how your project will be working. Next slide, please. Another resource that the NSF provides is any support coming to get you into the field safely and make sure all your partners get there as well. So the Arctic Sciences section at NSF has the Arctic Research Support and Logistics Program. So Kate Ruck, when she introduced herself, noted that she was a contractor working with our RSL program. And Kate just said hi to everyone, so you can reach out to her later if you have any specific questions. Again, this is all outlined in the solicitation, but feel free if you are trying to figure out how to get to the field, if you need to get to the, somewhere in Greenland, you need to get to a remote community, you need supplies, you need, just reach out to them and figure out what kind of resources they can provide you. They'll help you try to figure out how to get to the field. You, again, don't need to use the RSL logistics program. You can put that in your science budget if you just want to take commercial air, totally fine. But sometimes the RSL team can provide you with some resources that may be helpful. When you reach out to them early. If you decide to use their resources, they will give you another supplementary document which outlines what they will be providing for you that you submit with your proposal. Okay, next slide, please. And finally, we just wanted to announce that actually tomorrow, we will be holding NSF Navigating the NNA Proposal Preparation and Merit Review Process Workshop. And this will be from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow afternoon, a virtual event. And this is where NNA program officers will come together, talk about the intellectual merit and broader impacts criteria. What are some common mistakes made by PIs when submitting a proposal? And then we'll have breakout rooms just for you to chat and ask questions about proposal writing. So this will be such an excellent event. If you're new to submitting a proposal, and I bet you if you're a seasoned proposal submitter too, you'll probably learn something new, just to get an idea of what you need to be thinking about when submitting a proposal and what program officers and reviewers look for when they're evaluating your proposal. So I would highly encourage you to register in advance for that. Eve, again, put that link in the chat box. I think it'll be really, really helpful for people as you start to prepare your proposal. And with that, next slide, please. That's all of our webinar. You can see we have an NSF website that has this link to the solicitation, our FAQs. This webinar will be posted on there shortly. And if you have any questions, we'll answer some now, or you can reach out to nna@nsf.gov and we will link you up with an NNA program officer and get any of your questions answered. And yes, I'll just answer a couple of the immediate questions right there. Liz, these recordings will be available later. Liz will provide them on IARPIC and we'll also put them on this website that is posted on this slide as well. And I just wanted to also point out that Margaret Anamak Rudolph posted a really good resource on co-production of knowledge that has been crafted by Carolina Behe, Rachel Daniel, and Julie Raymond Yakubian. That's a really good resource for you to refer to if you're thinking about moving into the co-production space. So with that, I will be quiet. Feel free, I think will be questions in the chat. Is that what we're planning to do? And Rita,
people want
to raise their hands. Okay.
Yeah, if you want to put it in chat, Eve is going to help us monitor those. Or if you want to raise your hand and ask it, again, remember the meeting is being recorded, so you will be recorded when you're asking a question live, but we still encourage you to do that if you would like.
We have one question in the chat. So does this solicitation have any additional or special requirements for external review, or do we just follow the main NSF FAQ information about external review?
So I can try to tackle this. We don't have any specific requirements about, I'm assuming you're referring to kind of external evaluation over the course of the project, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we have no kind of formal requirement for that. I will say that reviewers always think about these things. They'll want to see if you have metrics of success, or you'll want to convince them that the project will be successful over the life of the project. So we would, if you think an external evaluation is something that's needed, we certainly welcome that, but it's not required.
Thank you.
Yep.
Don't be shy.
We did such a good job with the webinar content that, you know, we've answered all the questions already. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, Tom, thank you.
Hi, I'm Tom Marsik. I'm with the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and I want to say thank you very much for this webinar to you all and for the NSF NNA program as a whole. And so the question I have, so I know the solicitation says that in the research proposal, in the research track, we need to address at least 2 of the 3 components, natural, built, and social. And I'm wondering, is a proposal considered stronger if we address all 3, or not really, as long as we address at least 2? Thank you.
Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, in general, I would say going for more of the circles doesn't necessarily equate to a stronger proposal. If you can if your proposal does address 2 of the areas and does it well and touches on all of the other requirements, it could easily be stronger in general than a proposal that maybe stretches to get to that 3rd, but ends up diluting the other 2 in some way. Doesn't mean you can't have a perfectly strong project that has all 3, but it's perfectly fine to just have one that does 2 and does those 2 well.
Thank you.
And maybe I'll use this opportunity to reiterate that they really have in the required expertise to make sure that you actually are doing those components well. I think that's one of the, at least kind of common weaknesses that we've seen in the past, is kind of claiming that you're doing some of the, that you do in a specific area, but not then being able to clearly demonstrate that you actually have the adequate expertise to do that.
Thank you.
Anyone else, you can feel free to raise your hand or type your question in the chat. So our next question that we have is research focused in parts of Alaska south of the Arctic Circle included in NNA?
Bringing us back to the early days of NNA and debating where the borders are, right? I love this question because I think this is something that we talk about a lot, in that, I think a lot of people think that, both for NNA and for the Arctic Sciences section, that we're going to cut off anything below the Arctic Circle as not included, and that's not true. I think we take a very broad definition of what that means. We have certainly funded things south of the Arctic Circle. We have funded a lot of projects in the Aleutians, for example. We've funded projects in Iceland, which is just south of the Arctic Circle. But we really just want to see that your project is informing our understanding of the Arctic in some way. So there's not a geographic cutoff or anything like that, but we just want to see kind of Arctic related or informing the Arctic in some way. Does anyone in one of my NNA colleagues want to add anything to that? Go ahead, Greg.
It's both the yes, that takes us back to the early days aspect, and really projects that can inform us about the Arctic or the role of changes in the Arctic in the global system are fine, even if it's not necessarily something that's north of the Arctic Circle. It obviously, and Colleen talked about Iceland, there are projects funded by NNA all around the Arctic, so it's not just Alaska, but yeah, we don't take a rigid boundary on this. There's not a line on a map that we say if it's south of this, no, but it does have to inform us about the Arctic or the Arctic's role in the global system.
Thanks, Greg and Colleen. Next, we have a question from Timothy.
Thank you. I have a question about support letters. There was a slide about support, or a discussion about support letters. Is there a format for community support letters, or are they not encouraged?
I can take this one again. So as many of you know, in our PAPG, our proposal, kind of the Bible for if you want to kind of submit a proposal, your font, directions and all of that, has a pretty strict format for letters of collaboration from organizations. In our NNA solicitation, we actually have an exception to that for community organizations, Indigenous and tribal organizations, that they can deviate from that format. So you can, if they want to outline kind of how this might be beneficial, how they want to collaborate with the project, so community organizations can deviate from that template.
Okay, thank you, Colleen. Where did you say that? You said the format was somewhere in a.
So in the PAPG, so Greg just posted that in the chat too. That has the kind of format, like if you want a letter from an academic researcher at a university, it's like I sign in, I sign on to anything I've been promised to do in this proposal. It's like 2 sentences long. In our solicitation, we'll expect that from academic researchers, from universities, research centers. But if you have a community-based organization, a tribal organization, then they can deviate from that format, and we don't have a format that they need to adhere to.
Okay, thank you.
Does that help? Yeah.
Yeah, great, thank you.
And thanks to Brad for posting the PAPG link into the chat.
Yes, thanks. So also in the chat, someone asked if a business can apply, and Greg posted that NNA does not impose any additional restrictions on the types of organizations that can submit a proposal to the program, which is also, there are more details about that in the PAPG. And then another question we have in the chat, would comparative studies, for example, comparing projects in Alaska and New Mexico, be a good fit for NNA?
I guess maybe I'll take the lead. I think first I will say right away, we really encourage you to send or welcome you to send a kind of 1-page project description if you're not sure about fit for NNA to nna@nsf.gov, and then one of us will take a look at it and can respond, or maybe even set up a phone call if needed to follow on with that. So I think based on a one line, it's hard to really answer whether it is responsive to NNA or not. I don't see anything that would exclude it from necessarily being NNA. But again, recall the requirements of it, looking at the questions at the intersection of the social systems and natural environment and the built environment, and looking at one of the focus areas. And so as long as kind of you can address that, as we said before, looking at anything that is changes in the Arctic as well as global impacts of the Arctic change. And if you somehow can relate it to that, there's nothing precluding it from being an NNA proposal. Others on my group, anybody wants to jump in, agree, disagree?
I think that means everyone agrees. Our next question is about tomorrow's workshop. So will the workshop slides be posted on the website? I believe they'll either be posted to our NNA website or the NNACO website, right, Irina?
Yes, and actually the way that the workshop is going to be run tomorrow, the first hour is going to be more of kind of just presentation, and the second hour is the breakout groups. The first hour is going to be recorded and it will be posted. So follow the NNA Community Office website that we shared earlier. They're the ones who are hosting that event and helping us organize that. So the breakout rooms will not be recorded because we intentionally want to make sure that we have, kind of have a more casual conversation, but the first hour will be recorded and posted as well as the slides.
Thank you. Our next question, is there a plan to get Indigenous reviewers to bring their expertise on those proposals that propose work with communities?
So I can take this one quickly. So We obviously can't talk about the identities of reviewers, demographics, and things like that. I will say that given that we have proposals and we ask for proposals that may incorporate Indigenous knowledge or co-production of knowledge, you can certainly expect that we'll have expertise that can evaluate that on the proposal, on the panel review. So I'll leave it at that.
I will maybe add that everybody is welcome to volunteer
Yeah.
to be on our panel, or encourage your colleagues or others who you think would have an important expertise. We do have conflict of interest rules that we have to make sure to follow. So if you submit a proposal a specific year, you might not be allowed to be a reviewer, but we definitely welcome in general people to volunteer to serve on our review committees and encourage others to volunteer as well. The best way to learn about the program.
Yes, we would love to hear from you. If you don't plan on submitting this year, but are interested in serving on a panel, please reach out to nna@nsf.gov. We're always looking for new reviewers.
If you want to be a reviewer, should someone send a copy of their CV or just send the NNA email a message?
Yeah, I think a CV would be helpful, and maybe a summary of where your expertise are. We also, we tend to send out a poll just to kind of check people's availabilities and things like that. But yeah, CV expertise would be really helpful.
Thank you. And thank you for that question. Keep them coming. Tom, you can unmute yourself.
I'll just ask another question then, since I don't see other questions there. Well, thank you so much for this opportunity. I have a question about the limit on the number of PIs and co-PIs. So I know NSF has the limit of 5, but if it's a collaborative project where NSF awards directly to those entities as opposed to through a sub-award, so does the limit of 5 apply to each entity, or is it the total for the whole project? Thank you.
Go ahead, Greg.
So the limit applies to each of the proposals that make up a larger collaborative project. So let's say there are 3 different institutions that each want to be part of a collaborative project. There's a limit for each of those 3, but it's not a cumulative limit for the project as a whole.
Great, thank you.
And just so you all know, my cat is absolutely fascinated by all of your faces on my screen, and has been getting in my way as I've tried to read your questions.
I was going to say also, while we're waiting for more questions, if any of the other NSF colleagues have anything you think you would be helpful to share with the community?
This is probably not really helpful to the community, but we talked about volunteering for panels, and it's not just NNA, it's NSF wide. If you have an interest in any of the directorates or programs, all of us are recruiting panelists all the time. So feel free to send your CV in and volunteer. Thank you.
Yeah, just along the same line, if you're interested in environmental engineering, built environmental related system, you can also, send me an email or send it to the NNA, and then we can try to get you into those panels, since the NNA involved integration of built and natural environment. So you might get, some background by being in environmental focused proposal.
Yeah, so if anybody is interested in an REU, RET site, and you already have a NNA award, I strongly encourage you to look at that solicitation either in biology or in science or in engineering. I ran a couple of REUs panels this year. And so we're always looking forward to have more panels or proposals from different fields. So, we would love to see an NNA type REU site proposal.
Go for it, Greg.
I think I'll just take an advantage of the quiet to say also, the one pager, the short document that Irina was talking about, for the Arctic section, Colleen and I and our colleagues there, we actually find those very useful as well. If you're not, so separate from NNA, building on that though, for programs in the Arctic Sciences section, if you have an interest in proposing, you can reach out to any one of the program officers and send us a one-pager. We'll talk about it amongst ourselves and try to give you a connection to the best person to answer the question and talk about suitability. So it's a really sort of it's a much more helpful thing than having just, as Irina said, a sentence or two to try to work on.
What kinds of things should someone include in a one-pager?
So I guess I would say it's important that we be able to understand the science topic or questions, depending on how you frame it, that you want to study, and generally how you would go about, how you're thinking about going about doing it, generally the sorts of both intellectual merit and broader impacts aspects of the project. But you don't have to sit down and write a formal project summary style thing. You can, some people do. Other people just write sort of more general prose, but really it's to give us a sense of the project to the degree that you can give us an idea of what kind of resources you think you might need. That's also helpful, but it can be very informal. It does not have to be a formal thing. And it's certainly not required. It's just an option that's available.
Thanks.
I think I saw Siobhan unmute yourself. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. And I apologize for the noise. I've got two cats like Greg and two kids here at the same time. But I was going to say one thing that can be really helpful if you're less familiar with the program is just to look at the program page. We'll have a link to recent abstracts of awards that were made. So that can help really give a sense of what has already been funded in the past. And then really just to reiterate what everyone has already said, we are civil servants. We are paid to answer questions about sometimes complicated solicitations. So we welcome any and all questions in any format. So please don't hesitate to get in touch if you feel you need to.
Thanks. And maybe I want to add one more. Siobhan, I hear you about the kids. My kid just came from home and he was writing notes under my office door because I told him not to interrupt me during the important webinar. One other thing is that if you submitted a proposal in the past and you were not successful with that proposal, it got a declination. That is also might be a good conversation to have with the program director who managed your previously declined proposal. You do get back your reviews, you get your panel summary. We also, within at least within NNA, try to put a lot of thought into providing PO, program officers' comments with that declination. But if you also have some specific questions about that declination, that is also kind of one more conversation or could be useful exchange of information that you might have with that program director. With that said, I really encourage everyone not to wait 3 or 4 weeks before the deadline to reach out to us because, as you can imagine, the volume of communication increases as the deadline approaches. But also, honestly, those conversations might not be as beneficial to you because you are probably already hopefully, formulate your proposal and more of working on finalizing and any kind of final touches to that. So any feedback we might give you at that time, it just might not be as valuable. So definitely encourage not everybody like 2 weeks before emailing saying like, I want to talk about my declined proposal from last year, but it is helpful. I've had some conversations with PIs in the past about the reasons for, why their proposal was declined and how their thoughts of how to make it stronger.
Thanks, everyone. Do we have any more questions? We have another question in the chat. So I understand that NNA does not fund construction or rehabilitation of infrastructure. Can implementing an experimental technology for testing and proof of concept be eligible for NNA funding?
I think as an engineer on the team, I'll take this one, and then I'll let others jump in. So I am looking at the kind of trying to better understand what you mean by implementing experimental technology, and whether proposal is actually including development of that new technology as part of the proposed work, or is this really kind of, I guess the short answer is absolutely, this is eligible for NNA funding. From me as an engineer looking at it as a number of research questions that might be framed within that context. Now, something you might want to think about as you're putting together the budget is, how much, and of course, if you are a part of your proposed work, building a new technological solution to something, developing a technological solution to something, you'll definitely have some of the kind of hardware costs as part of that. But really the question that becomes, what percent of your overall budget is spent on that hardware, and whether you're purchasing kind of off-the-shelf equipment, or it's really just parts of you building new technological equipment, technological kind of advances. And again, remember, I'm going to say a couple more things. I'll let my other fellow engineer on the team jump in, Mamadou here as well. The other couple of things I want to just highlight here is make sure that you are still talking about some basic research questions that you are answering within the scope of that project, right? So NSF focuses on kind of, I'm assuming you're looking at the research grant here. And the other thing I'll also want to make sure is that, remember, you still need to make sure to cover at least 2 of the 3 Venn diagrams. So is this part of the built environment, right? And this is kind of covering that, but that on its own would not be an NNA proposal. You would also need to see how that will be coupled with, let's say, social system and actual system. And you cannot just use an existing engineered or kind of infrastructure and say, hey, I'm covering that Venn diagram, if you're not really advancing, if you're not contributing knowledge to that circle, just like the same would be true for any other circle. So when you're looking at the research questions and the interconnection of those, it doesn't mean that you're simply using tools or methodology or knowledge from any one of those Venn diagram circles. You can, but then it doesn't really count as you advancing or answering questions intersection of those. So that's just something I would like to encourage, and kind of this question got me to think a little bit more broadly with that. Mamadou?
Yes, so actually, Irina, you have answered a lot of the questions that I was gonna addition. My only addition is, when you submit a proposal, just make sure that when you develop a technology, the reviewer, the panel does not think that this might be an SBIR, STTR proposal. So you are not building this infrastructure at the end, say, this is my end product. As like Irina said, you want to show that you are advancing the science for building an engineering technology. So that's this way, the panel does not say that maybe this does not belong to NNA. This should be to the SBIR commercialization program.
Great point. One more thing that also jumped to me as somebody was talking about this question is, also remember we have 3 tracks for the proposal, right? So depending on where you're fitting it, because this seems to me, I'm seeing here testing a proof of concept. So to me, that kind of jumps that maybe you're not necessarily ready for the research grant, but you might be looking at the incubator grant, right? And there, that would be much more, this potentially could be more appropriate. Again, really encouraging to send a 1-pager to give a little bit more context than 3 lines to do that. But hopefully, comments from myself and Mamadou were helpful to give you a general idea of that.
Yeah, thank you both.
Maybe we have time for one more question. Anybody else? Any last minute? Yeah, Tom, please.
So I might as well ask, since there's time for more questions. So so I know you said that if we include co-production of knowledge, there needs to be a sufficient budget for the partners in the co-production. And would you have any numbers that would provide some guidance of what you would consider a sufficient budget? Say if 20% of the overall budget goes to the partners, and I know we might not have a number, but I thought I would just ask just in case you do some rough number as a guidance. Thank you.
No rough numbers. I would just say that's something that needs to be like, with the creation of any budget that you're negotiating with your partners at the time of proposal submission. So, it could look really different that you might be co-producing with an organization that's eligible to receive federal funds. So you might include them as a collaborative part of your proposal or a subaward. You may be working with individuals that have requested stipends or honoraria, and you can negotiate that amount. You may be working with people who simply want incentives for participating in a survey or in kind of providing some information as a part of data collection and things like that. Again, we know this is going to take a variety of forms, so there's a lot of flexibility in how you structure your budget to make sense for you and your partners and what the collaborators are doing as a part of your project. So I would just, simply have a conversation with your partners to figure out, what salary is appropriate or any other incentives or payment.
And maybe I'll add a bit more. For me, the way I look at it, and it's kind of personal, it's like if it's you and one more person, two people working on a project together and you co-producing it, then to me, I guess the easiest rule of thumb is treating them like any other collaborator on your project, right? So a 2 PI proposal usually splits the budget, proportional to the scope, but 50-50, right? So I think to me, that's kind of the best rule of thumb. Just don't, think of them like any other collaborator on your project. And then that hope, and I think a lot of us have experience with budgeting those, and Colleen is shaking her head approval. So I feel like I'm not way off the mark.
Thank you.
I think with that, maybe we will close up if you are muted.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say the same thing.
I think with that, in terms of ending on time, we want to, Liz, I don't know if you want to say a couple parting words, but at least from NSF, we want to thank everyone for coming and asking questions. If you have any other follow-up questions, we'll hopefully see you at the proposal writing workshop tomorrow, or you can send them to nna@nsf.gov. Liz, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Great. Just I will echo Irina's thanks and thank the NSF NNA crew for joining us, and thank all of you for joining us for the webinar and participating today and asking some great questions. As we said earlier, the recording for this will be posted on the event page and on our YouTube channel. So if you missed something and want to go back, you can check there. I'll also post all of the links that were shared in the chat. So you'll be able to reference those, and hope to see you again on the IRPIC Collaborations website and at future webinars. So thanks everyone. Have a fabulous day.
Thanks everyone.